I find the comments by my esteemed opponent really interesting. I come from the TB field, and what we've learned over the years is that we should look at HIV. What HIV World managed to do was really do money and pills, because it wasn't there. There was no ART available for resource poor settings 10, 15 years ago, and it was the resolve, it was the power of the HIV community that actually did this. So this is not a debate between realists and dreamers. It's a debate between visionary and the complacent. Okay, so you've just heard convincingly by Dr. Angeli. She just argued that in Southeast Asia it makes much sense to offer screening and preventive treatment to all people living with HIV, all children who are contacts of infectious patients, probably all people with selected cellular immune disorders. It probably makes sense to offer screening and preventive treatment to other persons who are contacts of HIV, TB, of infectious TB patients. But should it be beyond? Because this is the question at the table. We're not only talking about HIV, this was not the question. So here's the question. Now I'm a professor, so I have PhD students, and they have to make propositions. I always say, never start a proposition with everyone, because it's very easy shooting for the opponent. Because there is no set, I mean, we know in clinical medicine there is never 100%, there's never 0%. So hence, almost everyone in Southeast Asia should be screened and treated for latent TB, and there are 10 facts that make this a great idea. Number one, Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific harbors the majority of all global TB cases. Mind, this is a very heterogeneous area. There are places where there is still very high rates, like in Indonesia, India, but there are also places that are much more becoming like Europe and the United States, like Thailand here, like the east of China. Vietnam is also well underway. If you look, and I think my esteemed opponent made a very good point here, that there is still a lack in impact. We see a lack in decrease in TB incidence, and if we want to get, in the end, we want to get impact, we want to get the elimination, we have to do more. Now, a very important fact to keep in mind that in Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific, TB is increasingly a disease of the elderly. This is data from prevalence surveys showing the age distribution. The elderly have much higher rates of tuberculosis than the younger ones. This is partly the fact that you're doing to some extent well. To some extent you are decreasing the epidemics. You're doing things in 10 to 20 years that took us in Europe 100 years. And this is what we have to keep in mind. Southeast Asia's population is aging quickly. This is comparing 2017 and 2050 for Southeast Asia and the East Asia region. These are United Nations figures. And you see that we have a massive increase in elderly in this region. People have been doing great studies looking at why the TB epidemic after initial successes didn't further decrease in Hong Kong, South Korea, and Japan. It is due to the aging population. You are never going to get rid of this problem if you don't address tuberculosis in the elderly. The interesting thing is that because you just showed this famous graph by Chris Dye that underlined the NTB strategy and says, well, you have to do all these bunch of things, etc., etc. There has been renewed modeling, not just by one group. This is a modeling exercise driven by the Gates Foundation by 11 different modeling groups. These were all the bright people that were in one room, and they all using their own models did this for China and India. And what you see here, and what it compares, is what is the predicted effect on reduction in TB incidence over a 10-year period. And you see here, what really, really would have an effect is to combine active case finding with preventive treatment at scale. We are not just talking about HIV. Of course, you're absolutely right. I mean, the HIV population is relatively small, so you're never going to have an impact on the epidemic at large if you just treat preventively the HIV-infected population. It doesn't make sense from an epidemiological perspective. You have to do it at larger scale. You've just heard we have the tools to do it. We used to have good old isoniazid, and the data you showed were for good old isoniazid. Why is there such a poor uptake? Because you have to treat for a very long time. Actually, we now have to treat for 36 months or even beyond with isoniazid. I mean, of course, there's plenty of reasons why this is not being used at scale. But if you can just use 3 months or only 1 month, you're probably much better off. Testing. Testing has, whatever you do, TST, IGRA, very high negative predictive value. So we know that if a test is negative, this person is not going to get TB. Positive predictive value is not yet there. But there is a lot of, currently, a lot of development towards better prediction tests. And this is finally what I want to show you. There is we know this is data from a study that came out last year, a study that looked in Peru at just using a simple prediction tool based on demographic and clinical information. And it showed that you can actually identify a high-risk group, 20% risk over a 10-year period. And now, if you would use, I mean, Google nowadays here in this part of the world, everywhere in the world, they know which car you drive, which car you would like to drive. They know your sexual preference, you know what you'd like to eat. This big data approaches can actually be used to have prediction models that can really refine and much improve the prediction of who is at high likelihood of having TB. So, we need to be disruptive. We can't, the HIV world has been, and for very good reasons, has been saying to the TB world, you're complacent, you need something disruptive. You can't go on with all these old tools and keep complaining there are so many patients. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to be disruptive. So that means that we have to scale up screening and preventive treatment beyond WHO usual suspect. We have to do more than the usual. I think my esteemed opponent just gave a very good lecture on what needs to be done in TB. Hey, guys, we know this. This is what we are doing. We need to do more. And what we need to do more, we need to look at very serious at preventive treatment of adult contacts. We have to do the same thing for elderly, other identified risk group. I think in this part of the world, you can show the world that it can be done. Yes, we should. Yes, we can.